was Public Counsel's president from 1984 to 1997. During that time, he transformed Public Counsel from a 3-person office with a budget of approximately $220,000 to the largest pro bono law firm in the country with a budget of more than $3 million. Much of the work that Public Counsel does today began during Steve's tenure as president. In this and so many other ways, the Public Counsel of today is a product of Steve's vision, and we are so excited to recognize and celebrate that legacy tonight. It's a testament to the role that Steve has played at Public Counsel that so many have gathered this evening to honor him. We have board members, past and present, staff members, past and present, elected officials, dignitaries, foundation funders, and friends. I would particularly like to acknowledge Public Counsel's founder, Fred Nicholas. Fred is going to make some brief remarks in just a few minutes. I'd also like to acknowledge the other past presidents of Public Counsel, Stan Levy, Jonathan Adler, Charlie Palmer, Cheryl White Mason, Dan Grunfeld, Hernan Vera, and Rand April. Some of these individuals are with us tonight, and I'd ask them to stand. Now, in addition to the dedication at the lobby in Steve's honor, we have a couple of gifts that we'd like to give him tonight. We've created a book that includes photographs memorializing Steve's time at Public Counsel, as well as messages from colleagues and friends who wanted to share memories and thank Steve for all that he accomplished during his tenure as president. We also have a second gift. It's a tradition here at Public Counsel to present departing staff members with a drawing of William O. Douglas signed by all of their colleagues. We have one of these drawings for Steve tonight that's been signed by current Public Counsel staff members who worked directly with Steve during his tenure. And of course, we'd invite each of you, if you would like, to sign the drawing as well after the program has concluded. I believe it's straight back, and you will be able to find it there. We do have a full program tonight, and to get us underway, I'd like to introduce City Attorney Michael Fuhrer, who actually needs no introduction, who's going to serve as our MC this evening. All of you know Mike as a city official who has tackled a range of seemingly intractable problems like gun violence, consumer protection, criminal justice reform, and environmental justice. In his past life, however, Mike was the president of Bethesda during the time that Steve was at Public Counsel. Mike and Steve worked closely together, attempting to expand legal services for the underserved in our community. And I know that this is a cause that has remained close to Mike's heart in the intervening years. We're delighted to have him with us this evening for this special occasion, and I'd ask you to join me in welcoming City Attorney Michael Fuhrer.
Margaret, thank you so much. I think everybody assembled here knows how incredibly fortunate we are that Margaret Morrow chose to come to Public Counsel to lead it today. Margaret, thank you for your work. All right, so I'm Mike Fuhrer. I'm your cruise director on this trip this afternoon. And for what it's worth, it can either be a long cruise or a short cruise, depending upon how our participants decide to comport themselves. I want to begin, though, by saying a couple serious things. And I want to say them to Dano and Teddy and Matt, actually, Steve's kids who are here. And by the way, what a marvelous thing that all your kids could be here today. You know, kids are in school, they're in Northern California, a couple of them, and they're here. Your dad is so cool, just so we know. And you may not know this, because I bet you that Steve hasn't told the family this. I was going back and I looked at an LA Times profile of Steve from 1996. And for what it's worth, in that profile, there were none of you actually around at that point. There were a couple of dogs, I think, in Beechwood Canyon. That was, yeah, Lynn was involved, but yeah, okay. So the Times said that your dad is a legal legend back in 1996. So consider today, I mean, a career that continues to blossom. But Steve, that's no joke. That was very serious, and it was because the Times was recognizing that at a crucial moment, when legal services was not as robust as it is now, when Steve took over Public Counsel, it was a different world, as Margaret mentioned. And Steve was transformative. And in a career that, of course, continues to grow in marvelous directions. You know, we could be here honoring Steve for his philanthropic work, for his leadership of the state bar at a crucial time, for his work in the Davis administration. We'd be honoring him for his leadership in the business community, his work at NBC, of course, all those things. But I bet you, without messing up your current career, that if Steve were to be asked, tell us what's been really meaningful in your life, it'd be hard to imagine anything more significant than his leadership of Public Counsel. And Lynn, you know, in her own right, many of you who know Lynn Alvarez, Steve's wife, you know, Lynn was a terrific advocate in the legal services world for immigrants, a teacher at UCLA, a leader in the philanthropic community, currently a leader in city civic affairs. Pretty potent combination of the two of you. And extraordinary that you were able to draw on this afternoon a group that I'm sure no one expected to be this large, but it's this large because of the affection everybody here, Steve, has for you. So later on, our wonderful supervisor, Mark Ridley Thomas, will be introducing you for comments, and I'll reserve a lot of things he's going to say for him to say. Just know for me very personally, what a privilege it was for you to ask me to do this today, Steve. Thank you very much. So, let's get to it. I thought that helicopter was Mayor Eric Garcetti. As you know, Eric lives about 6 blocks from here, just down the street. He is coming, I am told. So when, is he here? Well, he's right here. Fabulous. Who needs a helicopter? It's like a stealth appearance. So I want to lead things off, and how fitting it is, Steve, that I know that the mayor's schedule is extraordinarily tight, and yet he chose to be here for this event, and that tells everybody here how significant you continue to be in our community. And I just want to say a word as I introduce Mayor Garcetti. You know, many of us in this room suffer from watching those public affairs shows on Sunday mornings, and so this last Sunday, Conan Nolan's guest on News Conference was Mayor Garcetti. And I'm not going to get this quite right, but Conan began by saying, Mayor Garcetti, one would have to be an incredible cynic not to recognize how many exciting things are happening right now in Los Angeles under your leadership. And it's true, right? I mean, an exceptional array of things, both now and far into the future, because those of us in elected office know the now matters, the future really matters. And Mayor Garcetti has been a leader for whom that has been a watchword, tackling today's toughest problems, but with vision for the future. Eric, please.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I was going to take the helicopter, but my attorney advised me against it. He's always saying the things I can't do, but he also has been a tremendous friend, and I have loved serving with Mike. We got to overlap for 2 weeks as city council members. Now to have such an accomplished public policy maker and an extraordinary lawyer as my lawyer. Thank you for all the great work that you are doing. Give him another round of applause. This was an easy occasion to say yes to. first of all, I got the phone call from Steve, and he said, we've got some big Olympic news. Can you please come to a parking lot in Koreatown? And I said, sure, you know, NBC Universal, whatever you want. You guys are the ones who helped us make it happen. And then Lynn said, you know, I've got a big announcement to make. The Clippers want to double their $10 million commitment to all of our basketball courts, and she's the president of our Parks Commission. So I said, absolutely, I'll be there. And then I got the briefing, and I learned that it was actually to honor you for your incredible work and who you are. But all kidding aside, I would go anywhere for you, Steve. You're somebody who's been a friend, a counselor, you have been an advisor, a mentor, and somebody who always cuts to the heart of who people are and of the issues that we face. You could say a lot of Dianus about you. If you had only been the head of Public Counsel, Dianu. If you had only headed up the State Bar, Dianu. If you had only just married Lynn, Dianu. I mean, there's so many Dianus, and yet you keep adding to who you are and what you do. And as mayor of this town, you're right, this is, I want to thank Public Counsel as a community, the supporters of the folks who are out there every single day doing the work. There's a veteran today who doesn't have her benefits, and you are helping her make sure that she does. There's a young person emancipating from foster care who doesn't know what he's going to do tomorrow, and Public Counsel is there. There's somebody in a tent on the street right here who needs our help, and Public Counsel is there. And to have the opportunity to work for Public Counsel and with Public Counsel is an amazing honor, I think, for all of us that have done that. To have helped build this after the seed was planted, and I think we have like 6 or 7 former CEOs here, but for the dozen years that you were there, that you helped build this into a $200 million worth of public law organization, and the biggest in the country, is an astounding accomplishment. Lobbies are strange places, right? Because lobbies are like in between, they're gray area that isn't quite indoors, not quite outdoors. It's not the destination. It's a place where people, though, I think, fittingly come with a lot of hopes and nervousness and anticipation. It's a place of random collisions where you meet people and see people you haven't met before. And so I think it'll be fitting that here, where people will bring those hopes at some of the worst moments they have and the most hopeful days that they have, that they will come here and they will look up and they will say, who the hell was Steve Nissen? And if we do our job right, somebody there will say, let me tell you about Steve. He's an amazing angel in this city of angels. And so I was told to only point, not to present. So I wanted to present Miss Vanna White this certificate. Yes, there you go. It's taped down, so you can just lift the whole thing up. I'll buy a vowel mic. Because this represents 4 million people, 4 million souls in this city of angels, who want to see our toughest challenges tackled together, whose hearts are as big as anywhere in this country. We're always thinking about tomorrow, whether it's a gondola up to Dodger Stadium, which we announced today, or whether it's the Olympics coming, who are constantly reassessing and reimagining what can be, to a person who has been one of those wizards of reimagination for this city and has left that legacy behind. Thank you, Public Counsel, for honoring this angel, and congratulations, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. So, what a privilege it is to be able to introduce our next speaker, Fred Nicholas. Fred, as many of you know, is the founder of Public Counsel. He's been a leading philanthropist in our city. When it comes to everything from arts to law to real estate, it's hard to imagine anything of significance that Fred hasn't touched and probably led. Fred, would you please come forward and say a few words?
This is what happens to you when you get to be 98. I'm really overwhelmed by this. It's just too marvelous for words. The fact that we're on our way to celebrating our 50th anniversary is unbelievable. And I'm so... I'm so proud of Public Counsel for what it's done and begun. When you consider that in the first Public Counsel was formed in 1970 by the Beverly Hills Bar Association with Stan Levy, I don't know if he's present here tonight, as the first president. And Stan Levy did a fantastic job. The second was the addition of the Los Angeles County Bar Association in 1975 with Harry Hathaway as president. And Harry, I know, is here. Please stand up, Harry. And the third event was the 13-year leadership of Steve Nissen from 1984 through 1997. And we're forever grateful to you, Steve, for what you've done, for what you've developed here, and made this into something that's very special. And we all love you and hope you're around for many, many years to come. And I thank you all for coming.
There's not a person in this audience who's not saying 98 is the new 68, right? Pretty great. And by the way, and what vision Fred had back at the very beginning. Extraordinary. So, as Fred mentioned, we have, and as Margaret said too, we have past presidents of Public Counsel, past people of the board with us, and I get to introduce two of them to come forward. Harry Hathaway was Steve's first board president, as well as later becoming the president of the County Bar Association. So there is always hope. He's president of this organization. Great things happen. And Tom Unterman was the last chairman of the board with whom Steve served. Tom, as you know, had an extremely important role at the Los Angeles Times as a CFO and executive vice president, and of course as a leading investor and philanthropist in Los Angeles. The two of them, would you please come forward and say nice things about Steve?
Saying nice things about Steve is mighty easy for me. I was on the search committee as an officer of Public Counsel when we searched for a new executive director, and we found this wonderful man. He joined Public Counsel when I was its president, and he was a godsend. We thought we had an organization that was on the move, but Steve gave it an incredible lift, a lift that we all couldn't believe that his spirit would bring to us. He came from a private law firm. Can't believe that he would leave that wonderful private law firm to come here and do this. This organization was blessed by this man's leadership, and I feel blessed to have been attached to him and have helped to find him to do this wonderful job. Look at this wonderful place we have. Steve, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. These days, not all that many people know that I once was a lawyer. But, you know, there's a whole theory and mythology about public counsel and legal services. There's the spirit of William O. Douglas and passion for justice and equality that is the wellspring of it. And then John F. Kennedy asked the private bar to begin addressing the needs of the underrepresented and underserved, and it led to Fred Nicholas doing remarkable work here in Los Angeles to start the effort. But it took somebody to make it tangible and real, and to take a 3-person office and a storefront about 6 blocks away to the building across the street and to here. And that's Steve. And that's a level of accomplishment, leadership, and contribution to our city that is just hard to comprehend and hard to match. And that was just the beginning of his career. He's gone on to do amazing things after that. So Steve, congratulations to you. Looking forward to seeing what comes next.
And, you know, I do think that sometimes we take for granted. Steve was a partner at one of the leading law firms in the state, in the country. And he chose to leave that to lead Public Counsel. At this moment in the history of our nation, when we're all sort of struggling with the tumult that surrounds us, think of that role model. It's not about me and my material life. It's about what I can contribute to the lives of others. Wouldn't it be great if that were the role model for the leadership in our country, not merely the leader here at Public Counsel? So, speaking of leaders who are extraordinary, I now get to introduce State Senator Bob Hertzberg. Bob is an old friend of mine. I've known Steve for 32 years when I was starting to run Bethzetic and he was running Public Counsel and already famous. I've known Bob for at least 25 years or so. And during the time I've known Bob, I think all of us know Bob to be among the most innovative, thoughtful, and deeply public-spirited elected officials that we've met. Bob has served as a Speaker of the California Assembly, and now he serves with distinction in the California State Senate. Senator Bob Hertzberg.
Thanks, Mikey. Yeah, you know, I remember when it was across the street. That's now a Korean restaurant, Fred. I remember when they came, and I think I was at the opening of that place. What year was that? In 80? What was that, Steve? What year did we open up over there? Was that what it was? 601. Is that what it was? Oh, you face me here. Guys, let me just a couple of things. First of all, I look around the folks that are here. I came late. I just literally raced in from Burbank Airport. I was in the Sacred Tomato dealing with what I got to deal with up there. You remember that, Mr. Ridley Thomas, from the old days? Yes. Yeah, I got to tell you, my heart sings. I look around this group that's here and all the people who've been involved in all the fights to social justice and form the fabric of what's important to the legal community. It's pretty good. It's pretty good about what's so great, Mr. Mayor, about the city of Los Angeles. And Fred, I remember you in the old days with my dad with the Center Study of Democratic Institution, the William O. Douglas stuff, fighting these fights. So it makes the democracy great. And I want to build just for a second on what the city attorney said. Pretty smart guy there. And, you know, it was September, of my recollection, of 1984 when you left Manette. Mickey Cantor was running the campaign for Mondale for President of the United States. John Emerson had just finished the campaign for Gary Hart. Chuck Manette, I think, because I remember it was at that convention in 84, had just become the DNC chair. It was the center of Democratic politics for all of us that were ambitious and trying to do great things and make great change. And what you did, Steve, was take a walk. I don't know what the salary hit was, but I know it was significant. But you took a walk. But you didn't walk away from the cause. You didn't walk away from the core values. You took a walk directly into the light, into the core values of what we fight for. You know, I'll tell you, all the time I've been in government, every year I always work on issues related to public counsel and providing legal services for folks with less means, because we pass all these cockamamie laws and we do all this stuff and we say that we're doing these great things for people, but without a lawyer, without somebody who could interpret, and there's Cantor right there, the great Mickey Cantor, and without a lawyer who can actually do stuff. And these lawyers, we know the statistic was that 5,000 people per cases people handle at work in these cases. It's extraordinary. But after that, you know, I also had the opportunity in the governor's office to work with Steve when he was a big chizo in the governor's office. And for those that remember, he ran the state bar. But at the time he ran the state bar, he believed in government efficiency, so that I think the count of the number of employees in the state bar went from something like 780 down to 22. And I don't think I worked harder, except on bail reform, which I'm killing myself on, except on that state bar bill that we did. Steve was in my office night after night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, dogging it to try to repair the state bar, to protect its core values, to protect what it's about. So we've had a long career and a long time together, working together. But it really only takes a handful of people, and so many of them, I look around, that are in this room that have engaged in so many unbelievable fights. Steve, you deserve this honor. You are a Menchie fella. You are a believer. You are a fighter for the cause. You deliver and close the deal in every way for folks. And I'm just so honored that you, as an Angelino, as somebody who's here, that we have people like you to be able to deliver at the level that you deliver at. Congratulations, sir.
So I do want to point out to everybody here, if you to the back of this parking lot and you see the photographs of Steve, you will notice something very important about Steve. Steve had a mustache in those photographs. And I just want to note for the group, this is what distinguishes people who are real leaders from those who are not. Just saying. All right. No, actually, let's agree that Steve abandoned the mustache about 10 years after it was appropriate to do that. I just simply never got the memo. All right. So, Steve Carlston is the president of NBC4 here in Los Angeles. We are blessed that he came here from Utah, where he was already a very accomplished leader in television. He now has, I believe, 37 years of television experience, more or less, under his belt. And Steve's going to come to say a few words about his colleague, Steve Nissen. So, Steve Carlston.
I'm a little uncomfortable with this, but thank you, Mikey.
Get more comfortable, would you?
So, I am really grateful to be here. But everybody missed the whole point of the helicopter. That was News Chopper 4 Bravo. Steve asked me to get some great coverage of it, so I said, hey, please bring the chopper over, get some coverage. But he was on his way to a car chase, and so I'm sorry we didn't get to stay, but he came by just to say hello. You know, it's interesting, Mayor Garcetti just left a little bit early. Steve asked me, he goes, any advice I can give you in life, young guy? I said, yeah, what should I do in life? And he said, Steve, why don't you make a list of things you want to do? I go, what do you mean? He goes, your bucket list. And I said, okay. I would like to go to the White House and spend a couple of nights there. And I was going to say to Mayor Garcetti, do you think you can make that happen in a couple of years? Now, as far as the mustache, Lynn, really? You couldn't talk him out of that sooner? I could talk you out of it. Okay. Now, the other thing that the boys are here. And just look at the boys. They got their mother's DNA and not their father's DNA, if you can tell. Same DNA I have. Thank you, Steve. That's why we're teammates. So I've gotten to know Steve a great deal. A lot of the general managers go to dinners, a lot of public affairs, and a lot of public events. And I actually hold the record in the entire world of general managers of a television station to have chicken dinners with Steve Nissen. So I'm very grateful to have had that happen. So when I got asked to speak, I said, Steve, I'll keep it short, which he knows is very, very difficult for me. I can go for a little while. But let me just tell you the importance of Steve to me. Steve is a connector, and the great connection that he has with people is what is represented here. I'm going to tell you a story about two trees just real quickly. One is an ornamental pear. It's got a very shallow root system, and it grows by itself. The other tree is one of a redwood, and the redwood grows 300 feet in the air, but the difference between its shallow root system is it goes 3 miles long, and it intertwines with all the other redwoods. The ornamental pear is the shortest living tree on the planet, 25 years. It's gorgeous, a lot like the people here in LA. After about 15, everybody gets a little work done, so those trees. Okay? But the redwood is interconnected with its brother, and that's what you've done. Buddha once said, one moment can change a day, one day can change a life, and one life can change the world. Everybody in this room or this outdoors understands that concept of connecting, of being one, and working for the better good. Steve, you're an example to all of us of working for the better good. and being an angel of this city.
Work, be a therapist. I did that for the first 7-8 years of my career, and I found out I was a closet advocate. My poor family, friends, strangers on the street had to hear me complain about the system. I was working with abused and neglected children, and nobody was listening to them. And I saw them become suicidal the day before they were being forced to visit parents who were still being abusive to them. And lots more that I won't take the time to say now. And everyone had to hear me complain over and over and over, whether they liked it or not. So you may not remember, my dad worked with Steve at Manat, and my folks were sitting with him at one of the million wonderful fundraising things Manat does. And Steve says, oh, we're starting this child advocacy project, and we're planning on bringing in a social worker. So midnight, you usually get a little worried when mom calls you at midnight, but she said, you have to call this guy. And I did, and the rest is history. And I want to borrow more words that were already used tonight. You're an angel, you're a mensch, you're just such a mentor. To watch how hard you still work is inspiring, and I hope to do half of what you've done is for half as long as you've done it. And I hope you continue to feel great in the hands of my husband. So,
that was really lovely. Lynn, there's going to be no living with Steve after today, I'm quite sure. So I want to introduce now a person who has played a key role in the growth of so many important organizations throughout our region. Wendy Guerin, who is the president and CEO of the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, has had a gigantic impact here in Southern California. I know from my work in the nonprofit world, and certainly from your impact here at Public Counsel, but across this whole community, Wendy has assured that the resources are there to do the life-changing work of one nonprofit after another, and we're really delighted, Wendy, you could be here today. Wendy Guerin.
It's awesome to be here. Let me just first say, what a great crowd Steve attracts. This is a powerful and important group of people who want to make the world better. And it's just a privilege and an honor to be on this stage following these speakers. I'm kind of blown away. I'm so proud to be here to honor Steve, who is so central to the accomplishments of Public Counsel. I have to reveal in transparency that he's now a member of the Parsons board, so he's one of my bosses. But I would say these nice things about him, even if he didn't have that role. I came to Parsons in 1986, 2 years after Steve came to Public Counsel. And really one of my first grants that I staffed was here in 1988. So my own history in philanthropy in Los Angeles feels very intertwined with Public Counsel, and I think that Public Counsel represents, for funders, one of those magical organizations that mobilizes, what de Tocqueville saw in America, people who want to step up to help. So it's not just that the services are excellent, it's that it catalyzes the involvement of the entire community. Parsons has distributed about $1 million to Public Counsel over the years. Actually, after hearing these remarks, it seems, not enough. I'm a little embarrassed. And I was asked to represent philanthropy, which of course I can't do. I can really only represent the board of the Parsons Foundation. But I will say that I think that philanthropy thinks that Public Counsel is a cornerstone organization, that it's a civic tentpole. It's essential to our civic well-being. It fights for those who we easily overlook, and Public Counsel does it with excellence and determination. And really, we know that Steve put it on the map. He made it happen. He created the structure. We're so proud of Public Counsel and the difference it makes to our town. And we're proud of Steve and delighted to acknowledge his leadership and the fundraising he's making happen around this acknowledgement of his leadership of the naming Thanks, Steve, for everything you do to make LA the best big city in this country.
So now it is an honor for me to introduce Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. Now, Mark is someone with whom I've had the pleasure of serving on the City Council and in the state legislature. And I want to say this, you know, in public life, there are many, many elected officials who, upon getting elected, they vote, they do a job, but in terms of having an impact and a real legacy, few elected officials in our region have had the fundamental role in our future that Mark Ridley Thomas continues to have. Most recently, in fighting to assure that the people of our county fund the crisis that defines our region, and that is homelessness. So with that, Mark, with your record of like 25, 26 years of public service just so far, pleasure to be your colleague in government and a privilege to invite you to come forward to say what you will about our friend Mr. Nissen.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, would you give a round of applause to our MC, the Honorable Mike Fuhrer. Repeat after me. Hope, opportunity, and justice. Now clap your hands and celebrate Steve Nissen. I think you'll share the point of view that few people work as hard and give as much of their time and their energy as does Steve, before becoming the Senior VP for Legal and Government Affairs for NBC Universal. Steve covered all private, nonprofit, and public sectors. And I want to say in each instance he's performed his duties with humor. I did say humor. Honor, excellence, and dedication that brings us here today to acknowledge all that he has done and that which he will do well into the future. The record will reflect that he's had 2 stints with the law firm of Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, and in between kept himself busy leading the California State Bar, as has been indicated. He was a senior official in the administration of Governor Ray Davis, and all while remaining committed to multiple philanthropic causes and stepping up when called on to do so. And most recently, in the instance of Measure H, that is to help end the homeless crisis in the county of Los Angeles, because it is the defining moral and civic issue that will effectively determine how we will be remembered for future generations. And for that, we say thank you to Steve Nissen. But we're here tonight because one of those things that kept Steve busy was being Executive Director of Public Counsel. And you've heard a number of people speak to how extraordinary his contributions were and have been and continue to be. May I repeat the term? It has been nothing short of transformational. And I want to say that he transformed Public Counsel from what has already been described as a relatively small operation into the nation's envy in terms of those works that need to be done to help, if I were to speak in biblical language, the least of these. Steve understands that, and he's worked very hard, worked mightily to facilitate those goals and objectives. And under Steve's leadership, many of the iconic public council projects took shape, including adoptions, nonprofit housing development, children's rights, homelessness and immigration, and might I say even more. And by the end of his tenure, 10 tens of thousands of families, individuals, and organizations benefited meaningfully from Steve's efforts, and for that, Steve, all of us and those who could not be here tonight are, in fact, profoundly grateful. And if you agree with that, you should just clap your hands right there. Steve never forgot where he came from, and to this day is an ardent supporter of Public Counsel's causes and Los Angeles' most vulnerable people. He continues to find a path to justice, to hope, and to opportunity through the excellent legal representation that Public Counsel provides. So Steve, your commitment to improving lives is inspiring, and I'm delighted to be here with you all tonight just to witness the unveiling of this mark that will be essentially one that gives more definition and expression to who you are and what you have become. On a more personal note, I wish to say the following. I measure a man by how he relates to his family and how he talks about them not only publicly but privately. Steve and I have shared any number of stories about being a husband, being a father. That says something deeply profound to me about the man, Steve Nissen. For that and more, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present you the one and only Steve Nissen.
Wow. Well, first of all, I need to correct something that Mike Fiore said. He referred to this article in January of 1996. In fact, I remember it well because it was the very day that our oldest son, Daniel, was born that the article came out. Which means that in the photograph, not only was I in the photograph, but Lynn was in the photograph, and about 8.5 months worth of Daniel was in the photo as well. Okay, with that small correction, I have one more correction. And I'm not going to do this all night. The word transformative was uttered a number of times, and look, I'm very proud of Public Counsel and what it's become, and I consider it sort of my fourth child, my little baby, but Public Counsel transformed me. And I just want you to know, and I can say this in front of Steve Carlston and many of my other colleagues who are here today, I've had a blessed career. I really have, and every job has been wonderful, but I've never had a more incredible, more profound, professional, and personal experience than my 13 years at Public Counsel, and for that I thank all of you. Now, there are about 16 or 17 of you who were on the staff when I was here, and I'd really like you to come up and just surround me. So come on. Okay, shorter people can come up on the stage. You know who you are. And wherever Pete Monzo stands, he'll be blocking someone, so. You can all come closer. Come on. All right. So, the arc of my time at Public Counsel began in the fall of 1984. By the way, I think about some of the new staff who's here probably weren't even born in 1984. So this is what you're going to look like in 30 years. I wanted to share the stage with all these wonderful people, but I think more importantly, I wanted to share them with you, because this group of people really was the rock and the foundation of all that Public Counsel has become. They really were the co-creators of many, almost all, of the projects that currently exist at Public Counsel, but they were pioneers. I mean, you all did something that nobody else had done before in the legal services and pro bono world, and you have left a legacy that is now this building and the wonderful and much larger staff that now inhabits Public Counsel. So first and foremost, I want to thank all of you. And I'm seeing some people I haven't seen in years right now. Okay, but you don't get to leave, so you're going to be up here for a while. Mark Ridley Thomas, thank you for the introduction. I have to say, and I don't think too many people are aware of this, but there was a movie shoot here for the last 4 days, including on this lot until early this afternoon. And I think it's really symbolic of the contradictions that we live with in Los Angeles, that the center of wealth and creativity and innovation is 25 yards away from homeless encampment. This is a city, this is a community of such enormous wealth on one hand and despair and poverty on the same corner. But, you know, that movie production, after its days of shooting, packed up. They struck the set. You would never know they were here. It's as if it never happened. But those real-life tents with homeless families around the corner, they're for real. And they're here, and they can't just strike those tents and go somewhere else. There is nowhere else to go until we solve this moral dilemma that is homelessness. And Supervisor Ridley Thomas, you have really been a champion with Measure H and putting money into a system that provides services for the homeless. Public Counsel has been fighting this battle for over 30 years. Proud to be your partner, proud to have you as our champion. Margaret Morrow, my successor. I think I got that right. So, we've sort of come full circle. When I was the head of Public Counsel, Margaret Morrow was on my board as a board member. Now she's the head of Public Counsel. I'm a board member. I think Margaret has gained a great deal of appreciation for the stresses and strains of being the head of an organization like this. And I, as a board member, have gained appreciation that as a board member, we are all properly compensated for the function that we serve, which is zero. Now, a lot of you may remember, may not remember, Margaret Morrow, of course, served on the federal bench, but it took over a year, right? 3 years. Over 3 years to get confirmed. And part of the reason for the delay had nothing to do with Margaret's incredible qualifications, one of the most qualified people I've ever met to serve in any capacity. But there were two senators in particular who were upset about her bar activities and her pro bono work. One senator, former senator from Missouri, was John Ashcroft, later to become Attorney General under George W. Bush. And the other was this guy, former senator from Alabama named Jeff Sessions. So let me just say this. Margaret Morrow was on the bench for 20 years. Jeff Sessions is Attorney General, what time is it? And I'm going to get to you guys, so you're ready. You know, I know most of you, which is a wonderful thing. I know a lot of you are skeptics of fake news, and that's a good thing. For example, Public Counsel told you not once, not twice, but 3 times that this was not a fundraiser. But you didn't believe it. So I just want to let you know that between the challenge grant and the contributions that have come in so far for this non-fundraiser, we are just a little past 3/4 of the way to $100,000. So if one or more of you wants to put in another $24,000, this non-fundraiser will be over. All right, let me quickly go down memory lane because I could do this for hours, but I won't because it's getting cold and dark, and I know we all want to go inside. But the original Public Counsel office that I came into was at 3535 6th Street, just down the block. Many of the folks up here were in that office. We actually did, and you should know, it's a 2-story building, and on the top floor was the Western Center on Law and Poverty, and we were the subtenant on the east side of the building, and on the west side of the building, cut right in half, was like Royal Typewriter Repair. Business with a great future. So as we started to grow, we did we literally called the State Department of Corrections just to learn that we were providing less square footage for our employees than the State Department of Corrections required for jail inmates. And in one day, some of you will remember this, the old timers, Mara, the oldest of old timers, longest serving. There she is. We got to the office, and the typewriter repair people were all gone. There were a couple spools, for those of you who know what typewriters are. There were ribbons and spools left on the floor, and nothing else. It literally cleared out overnight. I'm sure they stiffed the landlord, Western Center on Law and Poverty, and they were gone. So I always attribute the first major expansion of public counsel to the demise of the typewriter. So we took over the rest of the floor. It also helped that, for those of you who know what IOLTA is, Interest on Lawyers' Trust Accounts, that was the first year of IOLTA monies, and the statute was partially written by one of my predecessors, Charlie Palmer, who snuck in some good language on Pro Bono that got us some additional funds. And Bob Hertzberg and others were good enough to make sure that we continued to get those funds for many years to come. All right, so these good folks here. In 1985, so I'd been here a few months, we realized that one service that was really essential to the breaking the homeless cycle for families and to save battered women was childcare. So Abby Liebman. So the first lawyer I hired is Abby Liebman to both run our childcare law project and our nonprofit corporations project. And within a year or two, we had won a major victory where an insurance company, Mission Insurance Company, the primary insurer for all of family daycare, literally threatened to pull out with no notice, which would have made it impossible for any family daycare providers to provide childcare services. And Abby and the firm of Litton Stormer combined to successfully preserve the insurability of family daycare, and that project thrives until today. But that industry easily could have imploded 30 years ago with disastrous consequences for women and children and families. The next year, now that we'd moved the typewriter company out of the way, we realized we had an opportunity to do more and serve children exclusively. Is Barbara Reeves here? Okay. I think I scared her away because I warned her I was going to mention her. But many of you know Barbara Reeves. She's currently a mediator with JAMS. But in 19 1986, while Barbara was a board member of Public Counsel, her young child, Stephen Neal, died of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. And in response, she and the law firm of Morrison Forster gave us an initial seed money grant that allowed us to build a children's rights project. She didn't just stop at the one organization, though. A couple of years later, she and Frank Wheat, who many of you will remember from Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, got together and they co-founded the Alliance for Children's Rights. So Barbara started not just one children's rights project, but two. Let's see, Ken Babcock. So Ken, who currently runs the second best pro bono program in the United States, the Public Law Center of Orange County. But before he went behind the orange curtain, Ken was my wingman and ran all the clinics at Public Counsel, engaged in a number of groundbreaking matters. But you know, we believe there really was no age limit on legal rights. And there was an amazing case with a plaintiff named Roland Henry, who lived in the shadow of the Watchtowers right across the street. And he was an early street vendor. He was known as the Tamale King. So Roland Henry had been built out of his house by fraudulent contractors. He was a lovely man. It hastened his death. He was very ill, and unfortunately, when he was threatened with loss of his home, we had time to take his deposition, which we preserved for trial. He passed away. The case went to trial. The elder abuse law in California was very new at the time. This case was the first time with Ken and co-counsel from Graham and James, Steve Owens. They took the case to trial and got the first ever pain and suffering judgment for a deceased individual under the elder abuse law, which really set the stage for elder abuse litigation to come. It was an extraordinary victory, and Ken, the job you've done, you did both at Public Counsel and that you're currently doing at the Public Law Center, in Orange County no less, is really extraordinary. Oh, no, I was looking for Peter Gutierrez, but okay. So Peter's hanging back there. He was our most economical staff person because we didn't pay him a dime. After the Rodney King verdict and civil unrest, we formed the Urban Recovery Legal Assistance, and we actually took a floor in the Wiltern building. And we seconded half dozen lawyers or so from various law firms. Peter Gutierrez was working at Morrison Forster, and we offered him the chance of liberation to come to Public Counsel and help represent victims of the civil unrest. And for that period of time, we represented over 2,000 victims of the civil unrest. And I think, Peter, you and your colleagues played a major role in really bringing healing to this community at a very, very difficult time. For those of you who remember, we literally had a tank, a National Guard tank, parked at the Donut King, which is the donut place just down the block from the old Public Counsel building. It was like we were in an occupied city here, and the lawyer response, and Peter, you and your colleagues, was really extraordinary. Pete Monzo and Ellen Isaacs are here. Ellen came on board and helped us develop our affordable housing project. I think in the time you were here, over 800 affordable housing units were created with your hard work. Pete Monzo came along. And I swear, whenever I'd go around and talk to people in the community who ran nonprofit organizations, the first words out of their mouth were, Pete Monzo, he's amazing. He was our emissary to every nonprofit in the community, it seems, and really helped build that program. On Mother's Day, in 1993, so almost 25 years ago, we were approached by a group called Tanya's Children, which helped mothers who were dying of AIDS to help place their children with adoptive parents. And it was really staggering to learn that 30,000 children across the country were left behind by one or more parents who died of AIDS back 25 years ago. So on Mother's Day in 1993, we started an adoption project which grew and grew and grew. And finally ended up in the hiring of really the last two people that I hired before I left Public Counsel, Karen Ullman and Julie Newhouse. And you still spend your time at Dependency Court, right? Where you're here? Oh, they're here now. But they started out in the dependency court, toiling away, making sure that children who at that point in time didn't really have a right to representation had legal help to really ensure that the best interest of the child was observed. Okay, I don't want to keep you too much longer because you look like you're all getting cold. So, are you? Yeah. All right. So let me just say a few things in closing. And I'm gonna quote Shakespeare, because when else am I gonna get to quote Shakespeare? Measure for measure. He said, "Oh, it is excellent to have a giant's strength, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant." I'm surrounded by giants. I think I have been able to stand on the shoulder of giants. And your contribution, your shape, your strength is this unbreakable commitment to a just and compassionate society. And I think we're all better for it. It really has been an honor of a lifetime to serve with all of you. And by the way, I say to current staff, this is the legacy. Thank all of these people, and I know some have remained on staff, but please thank them for all the wonderful contributions they've made. I have many families here, my NBC Universal family. I consider Bob Hertzberg my State Bar family, since I spent more time with Senator Hertzberg than with the State Bar folks. I have some Manat colleagues here, Chamber of Commerce, other public officials. And then there's my real family. So let me first start by saying the person who taught me to read and write and has lived all of these decades to regret it, my sister, Donna Hyostek, and her husband, Jim Hyostek. When I was 11 years old, I was chaperone to my uncle Shelley's dating Dee Dee. I must have been a good chaperone because they're now my aunt and uncle, Dee Dee and Shelley Nissen. And it's said that the world is not just left to us by our parents, but it's lent to us by our children. So I hope we've all done a good job in reducing the debt that we owe to you. But I would like to introduce my three wonderful boys. First, the guy who was almost in the picture, Dano Nissen. Middle son, Matt Nissen. Okay, and I just got to say about Dano and Matt. Dano is a senior in college. Matt is a sophomore, and they flew down from Northern California, where they're going to school, allegedly taking time out from their studies and parties to come here. Thank you for coming. And then Teddy, who's a 10th grader in high school. And there is one more family member. So in about 1985, the chief judge of the immigration court, Chief Judge Roby, came to town. There were about 35,000 political asylum applicants running through our court system, and almost none of them were represented by counsel. And so the chief judge came to public counsel and he said, I want you to create an immigration project to represent. There are a lot of meritorious cases here. So you don't say no to the chief judge, but so of course I agreed to create an immigration project. I had no idea how to file a political asylum case or even how to get things started. So I phoned up some people and we invited a panel of experts. There were 7 or 8 people at the meeting. And across the table, there was one woman I'd not yet ever met. I thought she was really smart, really beautiful, and really wise. She had great advice, and she was very compelling. And 3 decades later, I feel the same way about my wife, Lynn Alvarez. So let me just close with this. We would sooner get on a plane and fly to Tokyo or send a text to Paris or wire money to Zurich, or probably prefer money being wired to us from Zurich. We would engage in all those global activities almost more easily than walking those 25 yards to talk to the homeless family in that tent, or to go to Compton or East LA. In this global community, in many ways, while we're connected thousands of miles around the world, we're not connected to the people right down the block from us. And I think one of the amazing things about public counsel is it breaks down our separateness. It brings together the threads of our obligations to each other as a society. It does it in the most compassionate way, and it brings dignity and justice to people who otherwise would have no access to this system that we have in the great United States of America. And for that, I'm forever grateful to have had this experience and get to share it with all of you tonight. Thank you.
So, it's freezing and it's dark, and Steve is great. So let's do this. Let me say first, Councilmember Paul Koretz was working at City Hall earlier. He's arrived here. He'll present Steve with a plaque inside. In the meantime, let's go and see this magnificent lobby.
Right at me? Right here.
Okay.
All right, we're still in the bathroom.
All right. So we're just a moment away from the and you know, we're all family here. Okay, all right, very good. All right. So
this is what it's like at home, by the way.
So could the boys come here, please? So why don't Lynn, boys, this way. So, Margaret, where is Margaret? Good. You want to do is there like a string to pull, or what do you want to do with this?
I think they just pull it down on either side.
Why don't we do this?
Pull it out, pull it out.
I would like, if I could, to get 3 Nissen boys to join together and unveil the Steve Nissen Lobby at Public Counsel. How about that?
That's good.
Gentlemen, you want to do that? All right, get them, everybody together on 3. 1, 2, 3, pull.
Pull it out, guys.
Look at that. Wow. That's really nice.
Can you pull the center tape down? Not use it. You don't have to clean it out.
All right. That looks terrific. And Steve, as we conclude here, you know, the mayor was hitting around a little bit about what the clients of Public Counsel will say when they look at this.
But let's say something serious for a second. From now on, every client of Public Counsel will know the role that you play in ensuring that they had access to justice, and that's a very fitting tribute, I think. All right, I'm told there's food, there's probably some spare wine out there. Enjoy it, everybody.
All right, guys. Take a step forward. Take a step forward. Guys, everybody right up here, right?
Stunning. Thank you.
Here we go. Right here, guys. Watch yourself. Step in, Mike.
Oh, sure. Okay, I get to be with the guys.
Got you. Hold on a second. Hold on. Hold on.